How's it going? Strife here. So this is part 2 of my DPS test for Warrior. After doing part 1, it became apparent that both Greatsword and Axe, without swapping to Longbow, were offered the highest DPS. So for part 2, I just wanted to try and refine my Axe Mace build, since I prefer that over Greatsword. And then people also mentioned that my Greatsword cycle isn't really ideal. I'm using Greatsword 3, 4, then 5 instead of just sticking with auto attack between 100 blades. Offers more DPS, so I was going to redo that test as well. So there's going to be 3 tests today. There's going to be the Greatsword again. There's going to be a Axe Mace without swapping, but someone mentioned that I should try not using Eviscerate and just getting the buffs from the 9% crit and the 12% damage from Berserker's Power and Heightened Focus. So I was going to test that. And then for my third test, I actually refined my build after figuring out that longbow swapping wasn't ideal. I played with it in some dungeons tonight, but I'm actually going to be using a axe offhand to swap to. What this is going to allow me to do is I'm going to get the benefits still of might stacks and 5 adrenaline on swap by attacking and then just switching. But I'm not going to lose out on any DPS from the longbow. So as you see, I just swapped and it didn't interrupt my attack or basically hurt me in any way. It's just a benefit overall. I'm also going to be using a slightly different build now that I don't need like the longbow range, but I'll talk about that more when I get to that test. Alright, so this is test 1 with Axe Mace not using Eviscerate. I'm going to be commenting a bit more as I do my test as well. So first thing you may notice is that I'm in a different location. I found a better spot to fight the Risen Giant without a bunch of ads around interrupting me. So I'm hoping it'll normalize some things as well. And then I'm also going to be using Healing Surge to start the fight off with 30 adrenaline. One suggestion I did get was to not black out my chat window and to just show the combat window instead. So that's what I'm doing right now. So you can at least see the damage in text form as well. So one thing I don't like about this test, obviously just a test, is not using Eviscerate means you don't get the 50% endurance every time you use your burst skill. So there's actually been a couple tests that I'm not using where I ran out of endurance because of quick succession of stomps from this giant. Alright, so this is the next set of tests with Greatsword. One thing I did change from the previous test, I put 30 in arms now and took Last Chance. I guess Stick and Move got nerfed. It's not 10% more damage anymore. From what people have told me, it's actually only 3% now. So 3%'s pretty minor. So I thought Last Chance would be a better option. Again, if you're using this build, switch to Healing Surge. I have it for my Axe builds just for this test to get 30% adrenaline, or 3 stacks of adrenaline rather. But I would still use Signet if you're going to use Signet cooldown, which you don't have with my Greatsword build. And hopefully I can do the cycle correctly for 3, 4, 5, which is 2, 3, 4 on my bar, to increase the DPS from the previous test. Alright, here's my first test with Greatsword. I'm trying to be a bit more careful with killing stuff in between the giant with Greatsword because of last chance. I don't want to proc it on something that's not the giant. So there, it procced. I am doing multiple tests as well and trying to take the best one. So as I mentioned, I'm doing multiple tests and taking the best 3. Pretty much the 3 that I don't mess up on. So yeah, I figured last chance would be good because even if you are fighting a boss, you're probably going to be fighting one every, 90 seconds or longer. So most of the time it'll be up. Alright, so this is the new Axe Mace build I'm using with Axe as my offhand swap. You can see I put Superior Sigil of Battle in there, so I'll be able to swap every 5 seconds, get 3 stacks of Might plus another one for my traits, as well as 5 stacks of Adrenaline without losing any DPS, since longbow switching was detrimental. I changed up my traits a bit. Instead of going 20, 0, 0, 20, 30, I took 10 out of tactics. People mention that for a lot of boss fights, when you're going to use banners, you don't need it up the full amount of time. Like, you're not going to have to recast it. So the banner's still up 90 seconds with 120 cooldown, but a lot of times that 90 seconds is all you'll need to kill a boss in a high DPS group. So it's kind of a wasted trait. If there is a longer fight, I still have the option to switch to Banner of Discipline. If not, like right now I'm using Empowered, or if I had to use Longbow, I could use Stronger Bowstring. So it still gives you a lot of options. I like keeping 10 in tactics, but you don't need the full 20. Instead, since I am now using Axe offhand, I took Rending Strikes instead. When you do use Axe 5, you're going to do 15 hits in a short amount of time. It's 3 seconds in a quarter. So what this does is it allows you to proc multiple heals since there's no cooldown with the Omnom Berry Pie's ghosts. So I was testing it out earlier in a dungeon, and I had like 5 mobs around me and I had pretty low health, and in that 3.25 seconds I was actually able to heal like 9k health. So it's really good burst heal. Obviously it's going to build adrenaline stacks as well. So since a lot of times I don't really need longbow anymore, especially running like in a dedicated group, Axe Mace with Axe on your swap is just going to provide a lot more DPS and survivability through leeching. So that's the build I'm using now for this test number 3. Once the giant gets back over here, we'll start it up. Alright, so here's test number 1. So yeah, this build is just a lot more suited for my playstyle. I like moving around and using the skills, like mobility skills and more utility skills with a Axe Mace. So you can see I build Adrenaline extremely quickly. Overall, I just like this build a lot better. So you should also note that now that I put 10 points into arms, I actually have 99% crit chance. So pretty much 2/3 of your attacks are going to heal, and then you're going to get 1/3 for the vulnerability and bleeding. So I actually really do like this build a lot more now. Also note, you don't have to use axe. You can use like shield if the situation calls for it. You can use Warhorn if you need to run around, or like you need vigor and weakness. That's what Axe Mace build gives you. It gives you the option to use other things that you might not get with Greatsword. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to show you is just how much survivability you get with Axe 5 if you are low health and have Omnon Berry Pies on. So I'm just going to gather up like 4 mobs right here, or 5, take some damage, and then use Axe 5. The other thing that's good is it procs a lot, so you're going to get your vulnerability and your bleeding. So right now I'm pretty low health. I'm going to pop my axe, and you can just see my health skyrocket up just from all the leeching. So by taking your axe on your offhand with Axe Mace, you can swap to that. You can do less damage than auto attacks, but you're just going to get a ton of healing if you have even a couple mobs, even just one mob, it's 15 hits. And then you're going to proc the vulnerability and the bleeding as well for DPS. So it's actually a pretty good option to use. And then of course you can use like a shield for certain instances, or a Warhorn or something like that if you needed. Okay, after looking through the footage, first, Axe with no Eviscerate. It doesn't look too much better than using Eviscerate, so I'd say it's just situational, depending on what you're doing. Obviously, if you're fighting multiple mobs, you're not going to use Eviscerate since it's single target. But if you are using or fighting a boss or like need a burst situation, I don't think it's really detrimental to use it. So get that one out of the way. Between Greatsword and Axe with swapping to a one-hand offhand, it's actually pretty comparable. As you may have seen, some of the Greatsword tests were quicker, and then there's one that was quite a bit slower. I looked at the one that was slower. It's because I had to interrupt 100 blades to dodge. So that's the obvious downside of using something that roots you in place 3.5 seconds. You may need to interrupt it sometime to dodge something. But then there was one that was roughly 23 seconds, where something that fast was very quick because everything kind of went perfectly and the giant wasn't stomping. So Greatsword's a lot more situational. It can be better or it can be worse depending on the cycle that you get off. Personally, it's not my type of playstyle. Then looking at the axe swapping with Axe Mace, that one actually increases your DPS quite a bit over my old build. That's the one I prefer. You can see in the times it's a lot more consistent because there's not a lot of variability between axe stomps because you're always moving anyway, so you're getting pretty consistent damage. You're not reliant on like 100 blades or whirlwind to contribute most of your DPS. So that's the one I prefer, and it gives you a lot more options by being able to switch out your offhand with other tools depending on what you are fighting. So I guess it comes down to playstyle. I think I've proven that both the axe swapping with offhand and then Greatsword are both good for DPS. They're both pretty comparable and they can both produce quite a bit of DPS for your group. If you don't mind Greatsword and being rooted in like that playstyle, it should be okay. And if you do like Axe Mace and moving around more and just having more options and utility, then that is great for DPS role as well. So hopefully this series helped you out and just maybe clarified a few things. I know it helped me out with refining my build. So thanks for watching.